Those are the big conspiracies.
Could be.
Down in their basement, they've got like a 10-foot tall human being. A race of giants that existed, roamed the earth.
Yeah.
David and Goliath's a real story.
It just seems like they wouldn't be gone. They wouldn't be the ones that would have been killed off.
Unless, in the cataclysm, like the Younger Dryas impact theory, there wasn't enough food.
Oh,
and they died off, you know? Because if you're that big, you need to eat a lot.
So you think they were around like way long ago?
Way
died
long
off
ago.
way long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think like recently. But I think like
yeah.
it is, there's so many stories and so many cultures have these stories, even in the Bible, of a race of giants.
Yeah.
Like it seems like it couldn't just be big people.
Right.
It seems like what they're talking about is something crazy.
I guess it could be if you're just because if you're just mythologizing. There's no way that's a word, but if you're just turning something that is real, this is the same with like a dragon. People obviously just get inspired by things that are around them. They start to morph into things. I mean, there was no fire-breathing animal flying around.
Probably crocodiles and shit like that.
Yeah, crocodiles, and then there are like cobras that spit venom, which obviously gets in your eyes. Probably going to burn like a son of a bitch. So like there's like the fire myth. I mean,
and people exaggerate.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So like people will take somebody who is a big son of a bitch and they go, oh well, let's exaggerate and say that the guy he fought was 9 feet tall instead of 6'5".
Exactly.
Which he probably was.
Yeah. Is there any evidence that there was other species of human beings that existed in the Americas? Like we're finding in Russia, and there's many of them that are being discovered all over the world now, these subspecies of human beings.
Yeah. This is an issue that I go into in America before. And what first drew me into it was Denisova Cave in Siberia. I think everybody's heard of the Neanderthals, and these days I think everybody's heard of the Denisovans as well.
A lot of people haven't.
I guess a lot of people haven't. But first of all, let's take the Neanderthals.
Okay.
For a long time, it was held that the Neanderthals were stupid, primitive subhumans, shambling, lacking symbolism. Turns out that that's not true at all. The latest scientific evidence on the Neanderthals is that they were symbolic creatures, that they did do art, that they were in every sense human, and they were in every sense human because anatomically modern humans interbred with Neanderthals. You can't interbreed with another species. They clearly were human beings, but they looked rather different from us, and that's why certain populations in the world today still have 3 to 5% of Neanderthal DNA. Then in Russia, in Denisova Cave, they find a single pinky bone from a little finger, and they do the DNA testing on it. They're able to get a complete genome from it, and what they discover is this isn't a Neanderthal. This isn't an anatomically modern human being. This is another human species.
So many of these subjects, so many people have like an instantaneous reaction.
Yeah.
And that instantaneous reaction is, oh, hogwash.
Yeah.
If this was true, I would already know about it. It would be taught in universities.
Yeah.
It would all be... But then you find out, like, no one is really just kind of trying to piece stuff together, specifically talking about these ancient tablets, which are, to me, some of the most interesting things about ancient history, particularly what came out of ancient Sumer.
Yeah.
Ancient Sumer, when you look at their tablets and, like, what are they saying? And why would they dedicate so much time to talking about this stuff?
Exactly.
Why do they have pictures of giant enormous people looking things with like a humanoid with a tail sitting on their lap? Like, what is this, just fiction?
Yeah.
Like, why would they detail this, and how do they have a representation of the solar system with the correct amount of planets and relatively the correct order and size? It's not exact, but it's an artistic version of the real thing. And what he believes is that it tells a story of an ancient relationship between a race of beings on a far distant planet that's in an elliptical orbit, and it comes near Earth every 3,600 years, and that they had engineered human beings out of lower primates. They had like accelerated our evolution, and that all of what we know about the cosmos, all of what we know about, like they have these detailed, I don't see the ancient tablets that have a detailed map of the solar system from 6,000 years ago.
Right,
They
okay.
have the sun in the center and all the moon, and they have these really enormous beings. And these enormous beings were supposed to be these things called the Anunnaki.
Okay.
And the literal translation is those from heaven to earth came.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the weirder, like if you
Anunnaki.
love a great science fiction version of the origin story of humans, it's the most fun one.
Yeah, it brings to mind, the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, which occur in the story of the flood and Noah.
The Nephilim too.
Yeah, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, they were huge. They were giants.
Yes. Yeah.
Men of renown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they intermarried, or they had sex with the daughters of man, and from them came a race.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that story is interpreted or perceived through the lens of the Hebrew Bible too.
Really?
Yeah. Well, there are, that is a story in the text. Before the flood, is the B'nai Elohim, come down to earth. They have intercourse with, the daughters of man, and out of those relationships, comes this race of giants.
That's the most fun one.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Well, they all got swept away in the flood. So that's an interesting turn of events.
But also, when you talk about races of these giants, you could also be talking about like people from Iceland, right?
Who were naturally
enormous
big as
Viking
hell.
dudes.
Yeah.
Who were always win those fucking strongman competitions. Those guys there's giants up there, like 400, like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, like that kind of person. So you think about that, like that's that size human.
Right.
There could have been a bunch of those around, and maybe that's what they were talking about, giants. Or there could have been like a specific race of humans. Like they keep finding these additional types of humans. Like they found Denisovans fairly recently, and then that other one that we brought up the other day, the big-headed people, that's fairly recently. They've discovered that this is a completely different branch. That there may, but here's the thing. If they did find those, would they tell us? Like if archaeologists, like who would put the cap on that? If they found like a 10-foot human under like a just gigantic dead human with a huge sword underground, like would they just say we're wrong, giants existed? Or would they go, people can't handle this?
Denisova Cave is a fascinating, beautiful place to visit. It's another example of a missing chapter in the human story that is beginning to be pieced together. It's obvious now that we were not alone, that there were multiple other human species who were human enough to interbreed with us and leave DNA.
And this Denisovan species was only discovered in was it 2000 something?
Very recently, the 2000s.
7 or something.
It's a very recent discovery. And
did they leave behind art? Did they leave behind art?
Better than that. They left behind certain physical objects which are extremely hard to explain. One of them is a green stone bracelet. And that bracelet is in the form of a torque, which was therefore slipped on sideways onto the hand. It's not a full ring. And a hole has been drilled through the bracelet, and from that hole it's been possible to reconstruct that a pendant was hung.
They throw mythology around, left and right to cover up the fact that they have no clue or idea, so they turn it into mythology so they can kind of say it's all fantasy and fairy tales, and this is how they express themselves or how they understood the universe. It's all mythology, it's all fake, but in reality, it's not all fake. These people left behind such detailed records and information. It's a time capsule of information on stone tablets for us today to be able to decipher, break down, and understand, and that's what we're here to do now.
It's not outside the realm of possibility.
I would say, they probably say.
Isn't that infuriating?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it was you? Now imagine you're out in West Texas, wherever you are, hanging out with your friends, and somebody notices something in the ground, and you start digging, and you pull out a fucking thigh bone that's this big, and you plop it down, and you go, what the fuck is that? And then you got a buddy who works at the university nearby, and he starts digging. He's like, hey dude, this is a fucking human foot. And he pulls out a human foot that's size 38. And you're like, what is going on, man? And so then you bring in some experts, and like, holy shit, dude, this is a giant. And then they do DNA tests, they find out it's a real actual creature.
Yeah. I'm telling everyone.
There is not supposed to have been any such technology in that period that was capable of drilling with a stable fixed drill, and yet there it is, and there it appears. So there are also incredible, very fine needles, bone needles that the Denisovans made, very long ones, which suggest that they were stitching very heavy stuff together. And the suggestion has been, were they making skin boats, for example, to use to navigate? That would explain how they managed to get themselves to Australia, which is where the largest amount of Denisovan DNA survives today. There's one of those needles. So there are indications of strangely out of place technology amongst the Denisovans, which is 20, 30,000 years earlier in the human story than it should be. Those kind of needles, that kind of bracelet, you could expect to find them in what archaeologists call the Neolithic, but to find it in the Paleolithic is very puzzling and very odd, and it suggests that the Denisovans were certainly not shambling subhumans, that they were refined creatures.
If people were supposed to be trying to worry about how they're going to get their next meal, shelter for the night, and all these kind of things, who has time to sit down and write these incredible works of art like the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example?
Yeah.
So I think they really were writing down, and also they were transcribing information that was given to them by these quote-unquote gods with a lowercase g.
So when you're reading things like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for people who don't know, is one of the oldest versions of a lot of the stories that you hear in the Bible. Very similar to them. There always seems to be a great flood. There's a few heroes. There's angry gods. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And Zecharia Sitchin's work was like the most controversial on the Sumerian text, right?
Yes.
Because there's a whole website called sitchiniswrong.com. Like, people go crazy about him.
Yeah.
But when he starts talking about it, when you read some of the things that they wrote, and when you see like some of the images that they created, the images that look like the double helix of DNA, and there's a bunch of that now we represent the caduceus, which represents pharmacies and drugs. Like that's the old version of an image of the double helix of DNA, or at least it looks super similar to that.
Oh, it definitely is, because it's referenced even in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and other ancient texts. So there's no coincidences here. Now, Zecharia Sitchin, I don't particularly go by his work. Not because it's controversial. I believe he was one of the greatest researchers of all time. And the reason why is because he laid out so much information for us to begin to scratch our head and ask questions.
Human beings have been around for this long. Here we are in 2019, and within the last decade or so, they figured this out.
Yeah, we're discovering new stuff about ourselves. We're discovering that our story is much richer, much more textured, much more layered than we thought it was. It's not a simple story. It's a very complicated story, and we ourselves are a hybrid species. We are the result of interactions with all kinds of different looking human beings, and the end result is ourselves. So it's not just that we carry Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA. In a sense, we are Neanderthals and Denisovans, and they are part of the anatomically modern human heritage. So you make a good point. The fact that this is only being discovered now, and that it's an incredibly important, it completely rewrites the story of our ancestry. The notion.
Says the 1970s.
1970s.
Okay, I'm way off.
The real work that's been done in Denisova Cave has been done in the 2000s, from 2006, 2007 onwards.
Genetic examinations.
That's when the major papers have been
2008. There it
have
is.
been published.
Yeah.
Which have revealed the genome of the Denisovans and revealed the Denisovan connection to anatomically modern humans. The fact that we're only finding this out now, that we told the story of our past and weren't aware of this, raises the question, how much else in the story of our past is there that we're not aware of? Let's stop being so arrogant, so sure of ourselves, so confident in our findings. Let's be more tentative. Let's keep an open mind and see where it takes us. That's the main message that I have from all of this. And I think, and I hope that this will be an effect of this book. I'm not kidding myself that the archaeologists are going to jump on board overnight, particularly so since I'm very critical of American archaeology in this book. And I'm critical of it specifically and explicitly because of the dominance of the Clovis first model for so long, which prevented other research taking place.
I was able to take stone tablets and decipher them myself. So anyone can go online to the UCLA CDLI online cuneiform digital library and read these stone tablets for themselves. You don't need Zacharias Hitchens. You don't need anyone else. And as I began to break these tablets down,
do they have them transcribed, or are you reading the actual tablet?
They transcribe them. They actually transcribe them into English for you.
Is there controversy as far as, like, are there different versions of the transcription? Like, do some people think it's interpreted differently? Is like some debate about that?
Only where it comes to where some of the text is missing. There could be pieces chipped off of tablets.
Right.
You see that corner missing from that tablet right there in the Epic of
Isn't that-
Gilgamesh.
just look how wild is that?
Yeah,
Just
it's
how
incredible.
wild is that exists?
Yeah.
And that this was, it's so hard for people to put in their brain 5,000 years of time,
Yeah.
and that there's these people that have this very bizarre language. Like,
Yeah.
when you look at that language, we don't even know what it sounds like, right?
Right. No, and the language popped up out of nowhere. You know, you're talking about a
Look how
civilization that
complicated
appeared
it
out of
looks.
nothing.
It looks like computer code,
It does.
doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Just imagine, like, a human being deciding that they were going to write down in these very bizarre, and they all agreed that all these things mean a certain thing. So they had to somehow or another have a Rosetta Stone or something where they're documenting it so that people can learn it and teach it. And then we're looking at it 5,000 years later.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
It is. And what's incredible is this text was translated in the 1800s, long before Zacharias Sitchin was born.
Tales of giants have popped up throughout history. The term giant was initially used in Greek mythology in 1297. Their original name was gigantes, and they were enormous creatures that fought against the gods. Mythology describes the giants as existing in various forms. There are giants of fire, cold, and mountains. There were many giants in Ragnarok, the gods' combat epic made famous by Chris Hemsworth's triceps. They even married into numerous god families and played a significant role in Norse mythology. Indeed, the story goes that the giant's flesh was used to construct the entire Norse human world. In stories like Jack and the Beanstalk, giants often take on a villainous role. Stories by Roald Dahl and Jonathan Swift, on the other hand, depict giants in a far more positive light. Experiences with these entities, which some sources assert, happened when service members were sent to Afghanistan. Many personnel of the US military and coalition would come across actions that went against normalcy during the war. Ghosts, cryptids, and UFOs numerous people saw firsthand the vast and unfathomable mystery of Afghanistan. Whether it was horrifying or really fantastic, what they saw is usually kept close to heart. While on patrol in a remote mountain area of Kandahar, in the southern part of Afghanistan, a party of soldiers vanished in 2002. Additionally, the military dispatched a special operations unit to investigate after they went some time without making radio contact. However, it was never verified which branch of the armed services they belonged to. Subsequently, the battalion discovered a cave high in the mountains with strewn army equipment nearby, but no trace of the missing soldiers, and that's when they chanced across the Kandahar giant. The story gets stranger as it goes on. Some accounts put the humanoid's height at 15 feet. Anyway, this monster with red hair, 6 fingers, leather moccasins, and the stench of dead bodies came out of the cave and speared one of the troops. At that point, the soldiers began firing, and after 30 seconds of non-stop fire, the giant was finally brought down. Between them, the squad was armed with full auto M4 carbines, recon carbines, semi-automatic, and M107 Barrett anti-material rifles firing .50 BMG, reads one report. Even for just 1 second, this much firepower focused on a single target would be devastating. No one ever saw the giant again after the soldiers killed it. It was placed onto a Chinook helicopter and transported to a transport plane. In order to keep the soldiers silent, the administration had them sign non-disclosure agreements. Finally, though, the troops spoke up because, as one of them would put it later on, the people have a right to know the truth. According to Snopes, who contacted the Defense Department in August 2016 on the Kandahar giant incident, the Pentagon flatly denied having any knowledge of a Special Forces member being killed by a giant in Kandahar. There is also no mention of a special forces troop going missing in Afghanistan or of troops cutting down a giant in any of the news releases posted by the Department of Defense online. This insufficient evidence, however, does not, of course, disprove the existence of the Kandahar giant myth, as does any good conspiracy. Some paranormal communities, in response to Snopes' debunking of the myth, have begun to assert that the government is actively trying to hide the truth from its citizens. However, thanks to the late great Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM radio program, the strange story got some popular notice. According to Orton, numerous soldiers have reported encounters with enormous humanoids in Afghanistan, surpassing the height of the average man. You can find these stories, however, they may be difficult to locate. Few people would come out and say they saw a huge figure sprinting through the Afghan mountains. But perhaps there is something truly massive out there. Orton purportedly provides many other enormous accounts he gathered from military personnel in his post. Among these is the Giant of Kunar, a gigantic creature that a commander of an infantry unit supposedly encountered in 2008 or 2009 while on deployment. It all started one tragic night as the soldier, with his newly equipped thermal scope, stared over a settlement. En route across the valley, he spotted what he took to be a very large heat signature, a cluster of Taliban men gathered around a mountaintop light. Out of nowhere, the heat signature rose as if from a single entity, the soldier recalled in Orton's post. The trees in that region reached a height of approximately 10 to 12 feet, and this structure towered over them all. Slow and relaxed, yet it moved with incredible speed, the soldier added, describing the giant's demeanor as one that was both relaxed and deliberate. It lingered for a while alongside the soldier's post before vanishing down a neighboring spur. Despite the fact that the soldier claimed few people knew about the encounter, hearing the coast-to-coast dispatch brought back vivid memories of what he had witnessed. In his writing, he speculated that the being he had seen belonged to a long-lost race of giants descended from fallen angels. The soldier would never face his intimidating opponent or take his head off, unlike David of the Bible. Orton also featured the account of an unnamed Air Force drone operator who, according to him, was scanning around, doing my thing and looking for stuff in northern Afghanistan as the conflict was going on. One day, the drone operator spotted 3 giants, each standing roughly 12 feet tall. There's a ruler tool that tells you how wide your crosshair is, and the people were as tall as the crosshair was wide, the operator said. This was all in mid-wave infrared at night, so they showed up as black humanoid heat signatures. In his 10 minutes of observation, the operator noted that the giants attended to their fire and carried out other tasks befitting their size. The operator said the only interesting thing was the size, and next to them, the goats resembled cats. The pre-OP soak that another airman described involved scanning and analysing live video feeds northeast of the Korengal Valley. The airman went into detail about how he scanned a group of people gathered around a fire for weapons. After about 20 minutes, what we thought were 2 dudes huddled together under a blanket stood up, the airman wrote. This guy made the rest of the dudes look like children in terms of height. He stood up and walked over to a mud hut that he had to bend way over to get in. Lastly, a sentry-duty Australian Army officer in the Uruzgan province of the country remembered seeing a gigantic man taking a stroll around a neighbouring compound. He described it as tall and oddly garbed. The officer assessed the giant's distance to be approximately 2 miles by lacing the facility. The officer recounted that it wasn't in any hurry, and he followed it for about 5 minutes before it went out of his field of vision. He also speculated that the gigantic being might have been 12 or 14 feet tall based on its Tinder profile. Just looked like it was walking, he wrote in Orton's post. Wasn't in a hurry at all, but was aware of what was happening around it. Kept looking around, especially near the compounds. I don't know of anyone else who saw anything like it. Never told anyone about it before, but it has stayed with me over all these years. Concurrent with the publication of the Snopes article debunking the tale, self-styled supernaturalist LA several right-wing websites reported Marzulli's claims that the US government was hiding this spectacular event and that powerful people had a vested interest in concealing the veracity of biblical prophecies. People have a right to know about this stuff. If there are 15 or 18 footers roaming the earth and our military has brought them down, we have a right as American citizens to know about it. I mean, this isn't classified military stuff. This is something we need to know. And it points back to the biblical prophetic narrative, he said. The mystique surrounding the Kandahar giant far outweighs the actual account. In 2016, Louisiana. Marzulli, whose YouTube channel is dedicated to tying current events to biblical prophecies, brought the story roaring back to life. In a video that was originally posted on August 16, 2016, Marzulli spoke with an individual claiming to be a soldier named Mr. K, who claimed to have seen the Giant of Kandahar killing an American soldier named Dan with a spear before the giant was brought down by other members of the Special Forces. Marzulli said that the monster belonged to the Nephilim, an ancient Israelite people described in the Bible as people of unusually large size and strength who lived in the region of the Middle East prior to and after the legendary flood that Noah and the Ark sailed through. So, who were these Nephilims? From God creating the heavens and the earth to Adam and Eve, eating the forbidden fruit in Eden, to God telling Noah to gather 2 of every animal to survive the great flood. The Book of Genesis contains some of the most renowned origin myths in Western culture. A fascinating and perplexing tale of fallen angels and a race of gigantic superhumans wandering Earth is concealed inside these more famous tales. The whole wild story is contained in just 3 verses at the start of Genesis chapter 6. The King James Version goes like this, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown." In the original Hebrew, the word for these enormous beings and mighty men is Nephilim, which comes from Naphal, meaning to fall. So this race of giants, created through demonic unions between heavenly sons of God and earthly daughters of men, is more accurately described as the fallen ones. Although the enormous Nephilim receive only cursory mention in Genesis, they captivated readers of subsequent apocalyptic texts, particularly the Book of Enoch. A group of lustful angels plots to have sexual relations with human women. This results in a race of giants who desecrate God's creation to the point where he must send floodwaters to cleanse earth. This story did not make it into the Bible. The very brief description of the Nephilim in Genesis could be due to 2 factors, according to scholars. Religion professor Kevin Sullivan of Illinois Wesleyan University focuses on ancient Jewish and Christian mysticism, particularly concerning angels and demons. He suggests that the story may have been abbreviated, or that the authors of Genesis simply chose not to record the entire thing. There were long-standing tales in the ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean worlds about deities having sexual encounters with human women, which resulted in the birth of god-men who were larger, stronger, and more powerful than humans. For instance, in Greek mythology, Zeus had a tryst with the lovely mortal Alcmene, and the result was the heroic hero Heracles, known as Hercules in Roman mythology. The mighty men of old and men of renown mentioned in Genesis were those legendary beings who were familiar to the ancient Hebrew Bible and Old Testament writers and readers. Additionally, the little text offers a cursory account of their origin. Sullivan claims that their superhuman qualities stem from the fact that they embody an idea that God never intended to create. they combine elements of both celestial and terrestrial beings, creating a new species. The Nephilim are not divine in the sense that they're heading back to heaven, so they kind of trundle around the earth as this weird mix. The 2-verse description of the Nephilim in Genesis merely alludes to the idea that the unions of the sons of God with the daughters of men were a sin. Still, subsequent Jewish authors took that concept and ran with it, adding an immoral and defiant heavenly gang known as the Watchers. The rebellious angels are called by the Aramaic word Irin, which is derived from a word meaning awake. Therefore, Irian has sometimes been translated as the awakened ones, but more often they're called the Watchers, because their job as angels was to remain vigilant and watch over mankind. Later in the Book of Enoch, even the loyal angels are called Watchers, but the name is mostly associated with the bad guys. Great giants whose height was 3,000 ells, or over 9,840 feet, are described as being born to human women in the Book of Enoch, rather than the heroic men of renown mentioned in Genesis. The terrible Nephilim devours all the food that humans produce. When that runs out, they turn to eating humans. In addition to bringing these ferocious behemoths into the world, the Watchers also instruct the women in charms and enchantments, the use of herbs and roots for sorcery, and the creation of jewelry and cosmetics for the beautifying of the eyelids. The men learn metalworking skills from the Watchers, along with how to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates. And there arose much godlessness, and mankind committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven, the Book of Enoch says. It is only then that God intervenes and tells the angels to warn Noah of the coming flood, intended to heal the earth that the angels have corrupted. God further commands his loyal angels to destroy all the spirits of the reprobate and the children of the Watchers, because they have wronged mankind. Destroy all wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end. Adam and Eve were held responsible for the introduction of sin into the world when they parched themselves from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, according to Genesis chapter 3. God sent a catastrophic flood to wipe out all human beings later in Genesis as a result of the wickedness of man, a reflection of his regret at creating humans. God spared Noah and his family because he was the only man on earth who had done what was right. As a matter of fact, some believe that the daughters of men referred to in the Genesis verse were wicked women who descended from Cain, and that the sons of God were good men who descended from Seth. It's worth noting that both Cain and Seth were descendants of Adam and Eve. However, the Book of Enoch presents a radically different picture of sin's beginnings. Here, the Watchers and their horrific progeny are the ones that ruin everything, not humans. According to Sullivan, this version of the creation tale originated during the Second Temple period of Judaism, when the Watchers were a symbol of the cosmic conflict between the forces of good and evil. There's this huge amount of literature during the Second Temple period that provided a pretty significant competing narrative to Genesis, says Sullivan. It says that God created humans in his image, and they were good, but it was the angels that messed it all up. The reason there's evil in the world is because of these divine beings. Sullivan argues that for hundreds of years, various Jewish sects held fast to their respective competing accounts of where sin came from within Judaism. When scouring the Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, scholars found fragments of the Book of Enoch among other apocalyptic texts that predicted a final battle between good and evil deities. As we enter the first centuries CE, however, Judeo-Christian thinkers such as Paul contribute to the formation of a Christian theology that, according to the emerging Christian orthodoxy, identifies the transgression of Adam and Eve as the original sin that necessitates the salvation of all people. With the Book of Enoch consigned to the pseudepigrapha, non-canonical literature of questionable authorship, the Watchers and Nephilim storyline fell by the wayside. The tales of the Nephilim, according to most biblical scholars, were metaphors rather than accounts of a real 13-foot giant who lived in the wilderness. But despite all the evidence to the contrary, the Kandahar giant myth is still considered an open secret among soldiers who were in Kandahar in 2002. Moreover, some veterans who served in the area claim that after that, they were told to point their weapons high by aiming for the head and then a little higher. Sometimes, as they say, there is more than meets the eye. Unless, of course, what is meeting the eye is a giant.